Hello, and welcome to Refund Policy. Steam has a refund policy where if you've played a game for less than 2 hours, you can refund it, no questions asked. So, I'm going to find out exactly how much a game there is in the first 2 hours, and how the game hooks the player in that time. Full disclosure, I have never played a Souls or FromSoft game before. I have seen some gameplay, including videos and watching my friends play, but I've never played one myself. I have also been mostly blind to the marketing material. That being said, I do already understand some things about the game. Drink your juice when the game is hurting you. Sit at the campfire when you want the game to stop hurting you. And the game is going to hurt you. This is pretty much as blind as it gets. I played on a pretty high-end rig, with an RTX 3070 graphics card and an Intel Core i9700K CPU, and a state-of-the-art transparent wired Xbox 360 controller from like 2010 or something. I bought, downloaded, and played 2 hours of FromSoft's newest game, Elden Ring, and this is how that went. I should add that I did not experience any technical issues over the course of the first 2 hours of playing the game, except of course for the fact that I technically suck. The game opens really well, with this building music over the title screen, and then some shit neither I nor anyone else is going to read, something about signing away my rights to my privacy or something. I don't have time for that. I only got 2 hours. After some brightness and setting adjustments, the game hits me with the character selection. I'm the kind of person who can spend a medium amount of time in a character creator, and this game definitely seems to have options, but I mostly glossed over them in the interest of time. By presenting these template options in this way, the game's already seeded some thoughts about coming back to try a different start in the future. After some deliberation, I select my character, breeze through the character creator because I'm not really sold on the game or my character yet, and almost exactly 5 minutes in, we have our opening cinematic.
The fallen leaves tell a story. The great Elden Ring was shattered. In our home.
The music was great and the illustrations were gorgeous, but I didn't really catch all the subtleties. Basically, there's this title drop,
To the Elden Ring.
and it was great, and now it's broken, and the American person is MIA, and there's these boss guys I gotta go fight to get them back. And also I have sweet fingerless gloves. And just like that, 9 minutes and 15 seconds into the game, my overstimulated attention span survives. Elden Ring isn't big on the pop-ups, look left, look right, type of tutorializing, which is fine with me, because I'm on the clock, and I might be half a decade out of date, but I get the whole left stick walk, right stick look, triggers to attack. I spend a couple of minutes fumbling with controls before I open the door to the wide open wait a minute. Now, I didn't see much marketing material, but this isn't exactly what I was expecting in an open world. And just like that, I have successfully died in a Dark Souls game. Now that I've stolen my first death from FromSoft, I make my way onto the bridge. These white lights on the ground are messages left by other players. These things are everywhere, and are varying degrees of unhelpful. They're a great little piece of game design that makes the world feel a little more alive and helps deal with the feeling of loneliness that comes from playing in a massive open sandbox by yourself. Between the bridge, the ruins, and the gray, I get this terrible sense of foreboding before the CEO of FromSoft himself fastballs this boy at me. I get my ass positively clapped, and we transition into another cutscene. There's this lady that says I'm lucky. Really, lady? I don't feel that lucky. Now, the game begins. One of the things that I like about open world games is that pacing is up to the player. I'm a pretty suspicious player, so I start running around looking for secrets, and then I do it. I hit X to interact. X is the button that I press to drink the healing juice. Y is the button that I hit to interact. I learned that in this moment, and never make this mistake again. Oh, that's a mistake I'm probably going to make more than once. Guaranteed. After bumbling around and looking at the pretty tree, I make my way up to the... Shit. Then I find my first sight of Grace campfire thing. and a fog wall that I think is some sort of boss or something. After fruitlessly searching for secrets, I read a tutorial about summoning friends, and I get fully fooled by very helpful player messages and stand on a button and rise in an elevator. That's when I open the doors to one of the most beautiful open worlds I've ever seen. And then I turn around because I totally just skipped the tutorial, and that might be useful. One tutorial... Okay, it doesn't count this time. The game told me to. I found the tutorial to be a solid environment to learn in, get my ass beat, and get a handle on the controls. With my newfound mastery, I climbed out the way that I came in, and was, finally, after 36 minutes, onto the open world. Blah blah blah, it's gorgeous. Anyway, there's this dude, and this red spot in front of him. This red spot indicates that someone died shortly after standing here. Another great little piece of game design. I now have a story in my head of these two goons who walked up, attacked this guy, and got stomped for their trouble. One water and NPC talk later, I noticed this great big tree here that I can probably see from anywhere above ground in the open world. Cool. I see this weird statue thing over here that looks interactable, so I walk over to it and... I go get my healing back and walk out into the open world, where I see a sheep or goat thing. Then this big golden fella. Looks like a boss or something. So I walk over, and he just looks at me.
He's just standing there, menacingly!
Needless to say, I dodge a couple attacks, get hit by a couple more, and get killed from nearly full health. I took that lesson to heart, and resolved to recover my souls and go elsewhere. It's an open world after all. No. I'm way too stupid and prideful for that, and turned around and got killed by him like 11 more times. Eventually, I became conscious of the time and the fact that I was making precisely no progress and moved on. Here I actually saw a ghost of another player sneaking off away from the tree sentinel, which would eventually become the path that I would take away from the first area.
Yeah, that's a smart guy right there. Smarter than me.
This is another one of those mechanics that makes you feel in tune with the other players that are playing the game. Now, the game sort of signals to you where you should go after the beginning by pointing with light from this gray site. But I saw that player walking off that way, and that was way more compelling to me than the game's obvious pointing. After admiring some of the wildlife and exploring the cliffside, and falling to my death again, I spy the next step on my path to dominance. This big boy was looking suitably evil, and so I decided to throw myself at him for a little while. Surprisingly, despite being a lot bigger than the golden boy, I was performing way better against him. I was dodging attacks, landing hits, drinking my juice correctly. I got my very first taste of victory. Just a taste though. This was clearly an enemy that was more my speed. I came back, snuck up on him, and died again. At this point, I was feeling thoroughly like a games journalist, but the third time, despite hitting the X button by accident again, I finally did it. After like 3 or 4 times, I had finally beaten my first enemy in a FromSoft game.
Yeah.
And so the pattern continued. Find an enemy, get completely destroyed by that enemy,
Okay.
learn and overcome the enemy. The game world is also full of story and wonder and Lovecraftian abominations. There was also this weird wispy thing here. I still don't know what that was, but it was cool, and I felt like there was so much more to explore in the game and to see in the world. Everything I saw was contributing to that sense of wonder that had piqued my interest. I also discovered that you could sort of stun monsters here, and even though I didn't capitalize, you can land a critical hit on the weak point when that happens. This was a system at play that I didn't understand, but was now aware of. Again, this was something that I wanted to explore and understand, so I did. This process of noticing something, investigating it, developing an understanding, and then becoming proficient with it is mirrored in the gameplay and in the rest of the world, and was something that I was definitely gelling with. You know, between the times I was getting rocked. Next up on my path to glory, I found these gremlin-looking dudes, and they didn't prove to be much of a challenge. I met a merchant that I wasn't terribly interested in, and then I saw a foreboding cave that I was totally interested in. The cave was so dark that the lizard part of my brain immediately assumed that I was playing Skyrim and that this was a loading door. But no, it's a cave. It was dark as pitch, and it was awesome. I immediately figured that I should keep an eye out for a torch, because walking around in a dark cave with a torch is exactly the sort of adventuring vibe that I was looking for. There was also a beautifully lit section of the cave, with a site of grace for me to rest at, and set my respawn. Still lacking a torch, I began to explore the darkness ahead, and came across this very helpful message, warning me of enemies in the dark. My eyes drew in towards the light ahead, and I made a dash for the warm light of a campfire. This is where I met these bastard demi-humans. The first time that you walk in here, there's no yellow fog gate like there usually is in boss arenas, so I had no idea what I was walking into.
Jesus fucking Christ.
Now my runes were on the line, so this was it. I had to beat a boss. It was time to get serious. So I walked in, picked up my souls, and got clapped again. And so I continued to descend into the demi-human's lair, learning a little more with each death. Until I had one final attempt. I had learned to stay in the first half of the cavern so that I would only pull one of the bosses at a time, and to try to wipe out the smaller enemies where I could so that I could focus on the boss. I had also learned that with the special attack that I had from wielding 2 scimitars was really effective against the bosses. With the first boss down, I snuck into the second part of the cave, where the second chief was sleeping. I knew that I couldn't sneak up on the boss without alerting the other enemies, so I settled for killing 2 of the smaller enemies instead. And so, the final battle began. I had 2 drinks of my healing juice left, and the boss only had 1. And I died immediately. I was trying to save my healing for when I had taken more damage, and that left me vulnerable to getting rushed. And that was it. I was out of time. Mr. Newell was looking at me, tapping his watch, saying, "Well, buddy, you gonna buy it?" So, let's review. Exactly what did I get out of 2 hours of Elden Ring? Let's start off by going by the numbers. Depending upon whether or not you count the tutorial enemies and the boss minions, I killed between 16 and 46 enemies. Not bad. In total, I gathered 3,256 runes. That's the game's experience / currency. Also not bad. Except for the fact that I lost all of them and leveled up exactly 0 times. Speaking of which, I managed to die 34 times. Depending upon how you count it, I actually died more times than enemies that I killed. I averaged a death every 212 seconds for my first 2 hours. Even more disappointing than that, I accidentally drank the healing juice 12 separate times. So, what's the verdict? Is Gabe gonna keep my money, or am I getting a refund? I kept it. Game's good. Go buy it.